All right. Hey, welcome to Comic Artist Pro Secrets. My name is Ethan Van Sciver, artist for DC Comics, and very excited tonight. We're joined by Superstar, a young man who has really done fantastic things since he kind of appeared on the scene. I think on Batman: The Dark Knight with Dave Finch. Ladies and gentlemen, here's the great Jason Fabok.
Hey guys, how's it going?
It's really cool to have you here, man.
Yeah, man, this is going to be awesome.
I've been watching you for a little while. I've been watching your work. I think the first time I actually saw your work was on Batman: The Dark Knight with Dave Finch. Like, you did fill-ins on that book, and they were fantastic. You want to tell me how? I mean, was that your first DC work?
No, actually, I had a few projects before that. The first stuff I ever did for DC, and really was my first professional work, was a fill-in on Batman Superman issue 70 and 71. That was pre New 52, and I came in, and they gave me these scripts to do, and I had been learning from David Finch before that. He was teaching me. He was like kind of my mentor, right? And so he sent in my portfolio and he got me this job. And I didn't know, I had no clue what I was getting into. Like, the deadlines were just insane. I felt like I did such a terrible job. And I didn't hear back anything from DC for a few months, and I thought, oh no, these guys, they gave me this job and I just blew my chance, kind of thing.
All right, let's go. Rewind. So that's the opening scene to the Jason Fabok. Right. Okay, that's the worst point of his career right there, and then we're gonna rewind it real quick. So what year were you born?
1985.
Oh my God. All right, so I've got a decade on you. I'm much older than you, which is something else. All right, so I'm going to try to put myself in the mind frame of someone who was born right at the same year that Transformers came on TV. I mean, so you were a '90s kid, right?
Yeah, it grew. Most of the stuff I remember was in the '90s. Yeah.
Right on. Okay, so when did you find your first comic book, and oh my God, what was it?
Okay, so the first comic book I ever have, I don't have it. I remember my dad brought it home for me, and it was an issue of Batman. I'm still trying to track down kind of what that issue was and whatnot. And actually, here's one thing that the viewers can do. There is an episode of Mr. Bean where he's sitting in a dentist office, and he picks up this comic book, and it's that is the issue of Batman that I had as a kid. But it's so, I can't see what the number is, or
Do you remember who was in it?
No, not really. I remember there was like a wolf or something in it, and a scene with Batman, the Batmobile in like the desert or something like that. I don't know. It was but if I saw it, it would probably all come back to me. But the first comic book I ever read, I actually have it here, was this. X-Men number 5.
Are you kidding me? 6. I need that one.
X-Men number 6.
Wait a second. Hold on a minute now. This is very serious. From one comic book collector to another. Here's number 7.
Nice.
Here's number 8. Here's number 9. Here's number 10. And they're all in near mint condition. You have number 6?
Yeah, this one's not in mint condition though. This one's got the cover falling off and everything like that. But this was my dad's.
Really?
And he wasn't a big comic collector. I remember one day we went over to my grandma's house, and he was digging in the attic or whatever, and he found a bunch of his old comics. There was this one, and there was like some old Phantom comics, and Superboy, and a couple other things. And I have them in a comic box here. But this was, I think, the first comic book I ever sat down and read. And yeah, and I it was, I loved the X-Men. I remember seeing them on TV on the old cartoon show and stuff. And
what did you think of that version of the X-Men? What did it kind of like? Were you like, who are these guys? Because they don't look like the cartoon X-Men.
Yeah, well, I mean, I recognized, Cyclops, Jean Grey, Beast, and whatnot. I mean, I knew all the characters, but yeah, they were very different than what they were in the night. Like, to me, X-Men was the '90s version of X-Men, because that was my introduction to them. Was the '90s cartoon show, which all the characters look like the Jim Lee, style of X-Men, and still to this day, that to me is
definitive.
X-Men. Yeah, that is definitive X-Men for me.
What'd you think of Jack Kirby's art in that book? How did you feel about it as a young man in the '90s, looking at Kirby in that comic?
Yeah, you know what? Like I don't know. I enjoyed the art, but for me, I don't know. I think my first impression was, oh, it doesn't look as detailed as the, more of the modern comic books at that time. But so I've gone back and I find that I've gained a respect for Jack Kirby now, looking back at his art, and I can see all the great things. But when you're a kid, I don't know, like you want the hippest and the newest thing. And I think, at that time it was like Jim Lee and Rob Liefeld and all those guys, right? At that time period. And I remember seeing a lot of that art, even though I wasn't reading a lot of those comics. You just were exposed to that because everything kind of had that style. Even the cartoon show had that Jim Lee style to it. And yeah, so I love, looking back, I love Jack Kirby. I love his work, especially a lot of the DC stuff that he did with the New Gods. I looked at a lot of that when I was doing the Justice League Darkseid War stuff, and tried to pull some influence from that.
So in a way, Jim Lee is your Jack Kirby. I mean, Jim Lee is the foundation of your childhood understanding of what comic books look like. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, and it still is. Like, I have this issue of X-Men. This is X-Men #2 that Jim signed for me. I brought one day when I saw him, I brought a whole slew of these early X-Men issues, and he signed them. And at first he's writing things like, really looking forward to having you draw the amazing superheroes or whatever. And then by the last one, he's like, I don't know what else to write on this comic book. So here you go. But yeah, to me, Jim was, I think Jim is to me, he's the essential comic book artist. I mean, I don't know. To me, like when I first read Batman Hush, I have a whole stack of all like my books here that I that were influenced.
Okay, those are your influential books right there. Let's run through them. Because first of all, are these the books from your childhood? So let's say in 2000 you're 15 years old. That's like people's prime for the most part of really having comics kind of enter their heart and their world and everything. So
yeah. And I'd say that this was around that time was where a lot of these comics, maybe a little later. I as a kid, I had some comic books, but a lot of my exposure to comic book characters were from cartoons and some movies. Like the Michael Keaton Batman movie was the movie that just blew my mind when I saw that. When I wasn't supposed to see it, it was on TV, and my mom did not want me to watch that movie. But my cousin was babysitting us, and I gave her a tape, and we tape recorded it off TV.
Whoa!
And my mom didn't really want me to watch it, but because it was the taped off TV version, they kind of took out a lot of the bad stuff out of the movie. But yeah, so that was like my first exposure to darker kind of comics, more mature versions of comic characters. But it wasn't until high school that I really got into comic collecting. And I think it happened when I had an English teacher. His name was Mr. Werbinski, and he caught me in class one day sketching. And instead of getting me in trouble, instead of saying, well, you should have been reading your Shakespeare or whatever we were doing, I think it was Shakespeare, he just picked up the paper, looked at it, and looked down at me and said, you should think about becoming a comic book artist.
Whoa.
And I went to learn that he was a huge comic book fan. And so he used to bring comic books in for me and a couple of my buddies to read. And I remember checking out Watchmen and I don't know, just a whole slew of different X-Men stuff. He knew I was into X-Men at that time and some Batman stuff. And so he was a huge influence on kind of getting me into comic books and, you know, taking those first steps into even just going to the comic book shop. Like I didn't even know where the local comic book shop was. And he says, oh, you need to go to Border City Comics. It's downtown Windsor, Ontario. And so I would drive. It was a good half an hour, 45-minute drive from where I lived in a small country farming town, you know. And so I would drive into Windsor and I would go to this comic book shop and I would just rifle through. At first, it was just all the back issues because they were cheap, right? Yeah. You could get a book for sometimes 50 cents or something like that. So I would just rifle through and grab every book. Oh, Jim Lee. Oh, great. You know, and I would just grab all these comics that I've always seen, you know, the covers online or whatever. And so, yeah, that's kind of where it all started. And so let's go through my stack here.
Mm-hmm. So somebody, by the way, somebody said that your Batman comic book from Mr. Bean looks like Batman number 463. So I'm going to actually 463. So I'm going to call that up real quick on Google, and we're going to have you confirm that. And
yeah, we'll see.
Let's see if the cover looks familiar to you. Ooh, it's creepy looking. Okay, ready?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that was it. See, there was like a dog or a wolf or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
That was the book. I think that was the book. Yeah.
How about that?
Yeah, pretty cool. I'll have to see if I can track that one down at the next con I go to.
Looks like Stephen Grant or Alan Grant. I don't know which one, and Norm Brayfogle, but I'm sure somebody will confirm that. That's great. That's really cool. Thanks.
Cool.
Thanks to the crowd there.
Yeah, thank you guys. So I'm going to go through some books here that I ended up really kind of influenced me. So I remember reading after the X-Men movie came out. I remember really getting into X-Men again, and Marvel used to have like an online comic viewer where you could go online and you could actually read comics, and they had Ultimate X-Men on there, and I still don't have issue number 1, but I have like issues 2 to, I don't know, 30 or something like that. I remember buying these off of eBay, and because I loved them. I read through all of those issues online, and I was like, I have to collect these. And I think it's I don't know if it's I think it's Adam Cooper who drew these ones.
Yep, I remember. I was working at Marvel then.
Yeah, and you know, this was kind of like when I was like I said, 16, 17, I don't know, something around there. This was the series that kind of got me into comic book collecting. And so I remember going out and buying all those. I remember getting this one, Origin #1.
Mm-hmm.
I was a huge Wolverine fan. Now when I look back at it, I wish this comic never existed. I wish that they never revealed. I think revealing a lot of his backstory kind of took a lot of the mystery away from the character. But at the time, I loved this series. Like I loved the art. I remember trying to draw a lot of the panels in it. But you know, now looking back on it, I wish that they would have kept his background mysterious. That he never knew his background, and even to this day, he wouldn't really know much of his background.
Now, is that a cautionary tale also for people who want to know too much about the Joker?
Yeah, it could be. Yeah. I think that again, I think Joker works that way, and I think another character that was ruined by kind of showing his backstory from Star Wars was both Darth Vader and Boba Fett. I think Boba Fett especially is this mysterious guy, and you know, they should have never he should have always just been a guy in a mask. He should have never really known who he was, because it takes some of the mystery away from the character. I remember really liking Scott Campbell's art, J. Scott Campbell, and I remember Danger Girl picking this one up because it's a double issue, and just really studying the art and his line work and the way that he could capture. It's almost caricature-ish, but at the same time, it's got some he had really good movement and storytelling and lighting and all that kind of stuff. So that one was a big one for me too. And then this was around the era when I started to really get serious about trying to draw comics. So this would be when I was near the, well, probably actually post high school, college, and whatnot. And so these are some, I don't know if they're in any particular order, but this one here was the first book that I really got into David Finch. And Ultimatum. I still think that Ultimatum, there was 5 issues of this. I still think that this was Dave's best work as a penciler. Like the backgrounds in this book are just insane. And I have the trade that sits next to me. And anytime I need, like anytime I'm looking at visual reference for backgrounds and stuff, I still go to this stuff. Like I think that this is kind of like, the Bible of how to draw crazy detailed backgrounds in cities and destruction and all that stuff. And this was what made me a fan of Dave. And, not too long after reading this was I, going over to his house, learning from him. I remember picking.
Well, we'll get to that. Never mind. Keep going.
Yeah, I'll go through these ones quick. Blackest Night, Jeff Johns. I think it was maybe the first Jeff Johns stuff I had ever read, but this really excited me when this came out. I wasn't really a huge DC fan at this time, but it really opened up my eyes to the broader DC universe, and because Jeff likes to use a lot of he doesn't always just use the A-list characters. He uses C and D-list characters and makes you love them. So, and Ivan Rice's art on this is just incredible.
That's his best cover. That's the best cover of the series, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's why I picked this one at number 2 instead of number 1. But I became a lifelong fan of his after that day. And here's one that you might recognize, Flash Rebirth. So this was the first time I think I picked up your work.
I didn't ask you to do this, Gus.
Yeah. I remember buying this at a comic book shop in Stratford, Ontario, when I was dating my wife. This was back before we got married. She lived 6 hours north. And so I would drive through this little town on my way up to see her. And this comic shop had this entire run, except for issue 4 or something like that, which I ended up finding at a Comic-Con not too long ago. But I remember picking this up and just this is what introduced me to your art. And I remember meeting you at C2E2. I went up with David Finch, and I still have the poster. It was a Flash poster. I still have it. I'm going to hang it in my son's room.
Oh.
So this was a big one that really introduced me to your artwork. And again, I think people can kind of see where all of my influences come from. It's very, that very detailed, artwork, not hyper realistic, but realistic enough that it captures some realism, but bold and lots of shadow and blacks, and
we're coming from the same place. Yeah, we both have this kind of like representative realism kind of preference in the comics we read, the art that we like, and then our own styles. I think you also include Gary Frank in that group, who I think right now, one of the best artists working at DC. I would actually say the best artist working at DC right now. I hesitate to say that, but yeah, it's true, I think.
I agree. I think Gary Frank is the best comic artist working in the world today. And I think that with Doomsday Clock, I think if people already don't know that, they're going to know it after they read that series. That's going to really propel them. And speaking of Watchmen, I got Watchmen. I remember reading Watchmen and just being blown away by it. Dave Gibbons' work, again, it was an influence on the way I wanted to draw as well. And I picked this one up just recently, actually. I went back and tried to find the whole run, and Dave Gibbons signed this one at a con, so pretty cool. And then the last one I have in my stack here was Batman and Robin #1 by Grant Morrison, Frank Quitely. And this book, this book introduced me to Frank's work, and I've been a fan ever since. It just blew me away, his work. And I don't know, I still consider this like one of my favorite all-time issues. And it's sad that Frank Quitely only did the first 3 issues of this series. I wish he would have done like the whole run, but the first 3 issues are the best. And you know, this is just one of my favorite covers and my favorite books. So those are all books that really influenced me as a young person trying to get into comics, and reading those around the same time I was kind of building my portfolio. And so,
what a great thing to do. I mean, I worry that somebody born in 1985 missed all the great artists that like I kind of grew up with, like John Byrne and John Bogdanove, and you know, the early Marvel artists that were so good. But boy, I almost would rather have your guys as my formative influences. I mean, looking at that list, Frank Quitely, you know, Dave Gibbons kind of is a little bit more old school. But Dave Finch and Gary Franken, these guys being your artists that you grew up with, if being a comic book artist means standing on the shoulders of giants, you have huge like shoulders that you're standing on. I mean, these guys are great. They're the best of the best. Especially Frank Quitely. Wow, I didn't know that you were influenced by him. I was too. I talk about it all the time.
I mean, there's plenty of other guys too, like that you really don't really see their influence in my work, but I fell in love with their art. Guys like Tim Sale. You know, Tim Sale, like I still think that his Batman stuff that he did with The Long Halloween and Dark Victory, I think that those are 2 of the best Batman stories of all time. And you know, he doesn't, I mean, I think he deserves a little more love too. And his artwork style is very totally opposite from what I would draw, but it just works, and I've always really loved it. You know, and also, this one here is a big influence on me too, is Brian Boland, you know, like, and this is Brian Boland is really somebody that I've really fallen in love with recently. And so it's been like the last like maybe 5 years I've really taken notice of him. And so, yeah, look at that.
Too far from my desk is the other big book like that. Yeah.
So,
oh my goodness.
Boland's art is somebody I read through this book, and I study all of his line work constantly. You know, I don't know if I could ever draw as clean as he does, but
well, that's all on computer now. I mean, that's the thing. He's doing most of that digitally now. So I don't know. Well, so all right. So those were the comics that you found. Now, at what point did you draw a comic book? And tell me about your first comic book, maybe that wasn't even published. Did you do any?
Okay. Yeah. So after finishing high school, a buddy and me, we had come up with this little story. It was like a fantasy story with like these 2, you know, Lord of the Rings style characters, and it was a very simple story. They go and they have to hunt this guy down and stop him or whatever. And I spent all summer just drawing this book and scanning the pages, and then digitally coloring the book and putting it all together. And I still think it's out there online because I had posted it on like an online comic kind of publishing format back in the day. This was probably like 2003, something around there, maybe a little later than that. But it was called Blade and Mace. Blade and Mace, because the one guy had a sword and the other guy had a mace. And so
a mace, not that kind of
mace. No, it was a mace. So so that was, I did that, and then right after that, that's when I went into college, and I took computer animation in college at St. Clair College here in Windsor, because I didn't really know where you go to school for comic book art. You know, like I didn't really know about the Kubert School, and I knew that the local college here had this animation course, and so I took that because I figured, you know what, maybe I don't know if I'll ever make it as a comic book artist, but if I go to this course in the school, I can maybe get into animation, graphic design, illustration, movies, whatever. I was into all that stuff. So I went there, I did that for 3 years. And then this is when my story kind of takes a turn. I graduated from that course, and I was actually offered a job right out of school to go and work for an animation studio up in Toronto, but I just didn't feel it was where I needed to be. And some people might know I'm a Christian. I'm a Bible believing Christian, devout kind of guy. And so at that point in time, I felt like, you know, I pray a lot about things, and I pray a lot about like what I should be working on, and truly just trusting that God would lead my career, and kind of, he has. He's really led me in the direction that he wants me to go. At that time, God told me to quit my art and go to Bible college. And so the story goes is that I walked away from my art. I found this little Bible college up in Owen Sound, Ontario, and I just felt like that's where God wanted me to go. And so I went to this Bible college, and it was just a 1-year kind of hardcore, like studying the Bible, just learning, we went book by book, I think I read through the Bible like 2 or 3 times that year, going through all the books, and we'd have some of the best professors and historians and theologians come in and teach us. And I just really wanted to learn what I believed. And it was there that I kind of realized that everything I was chasing up to that point was for my own selfish desires. It was to be famous. It was to make tons of money. And it was to get girls. Like those were like every dream I had from, you know, in high school. Like I wanted to do comics. I wanted to make movies. I wanted to be a musician, a rock star. Like all of those things, all was because I wanted fame, fortune, and girls, you know. But when I was at this Bible college, it kind of humbled me, and I realized that I'd been, you know, God had given me some talents and some gifts, and don't use them for shallow, hollow things. Use them for good. Use them to inspire others, and you know, use them. I believe I use my talents to the glory of God. I want people to look at my art and go, wow, you know, why does he work so hard on his work? How come he works so hard on his art? And I want to say, well, it's because in the Bible, Jesus commands me to do all things as if I'm doing them for God, you know. So if I'm going to draw a comic book page, I'm going to make it the best page I possibly can, because if God had asked me to draw that directly, I would try and do the best I could, you know. So that's how I see work. That's how I see job, and how everything, like if you have that kind of an idea about your work and your job, well, then you always put forth your best work. And it wasn't until I kind of was humbled that I realized, like all of a sudden God was kind of saying to me like, hey, let's chase this comic book dream again. And it kind of gave me that desire to go after it. But now it was like, it was totally different. It was like I had a passion and a drive like I never had before. And it just seemed like my art was my skills and everything. I was just soaking in and absorbing all these things, and just could all of a sudden put it on the page how I wanted to kind of draw it. And I practiced every day. Even though I was doing all this coursework, I was still going back to my dorm and just drawing. And you know, the other cool thing about when I went to that Bible college is I met my wife there. And you know, we fell in love there, and that's where we met. And
so you're not getting girls from comics; you're getting them from Bible college, which
is well, hey,
probably getting a better,
it's true,
nicer girls.
Yeah, and my wife had the same foundation and the same beliefs and the same moral beliefs as me, and so, you know, God provided my partner in this life, and she's been such a huge part of my work. Right. You know, she's the support system behind me, you know, every day. I know that you can attest to that too. So,
yep.
You know, you need that. And, you know, so then it was like, okay, I started forming a portfolio, but I didn't really know where to go and what to do. And a friend of mine knew David Finch, because David Finch lives in Windsor, Ontario, and I'm from that area. And so a friend of mine said, hey, why don't you send your stuff to David? I just so happened to have his email, because this guy that I went to college with, I don't know if he had babysat Dave's kids, and he was getting, or his girlfriend was, and he was getting some art lessons from Dave. So I knew that Dave would actually sit down with you and give you some lessons. So all I wanted him to do was just critique my work. Tell me what I could work on.
that seems to have been put together for you. You think that was coincidental?
No, it's all, I believe it's all God's plan for my life. And there's even more, even way back, where God had shut doors to dreams that I had. And I didn't really know why he was doing that. Why would you shut this door? And then you see why. You see why years later, why he shut certain doors and certain paths. You know, but so I sent my portfolio to Dave, asked him if he could just look at it. He invites me over to his house. This turns into six weeks, or no, it was about 6 months actually. No, it was long. It was like half a year. I went over to Dave's house every 2, 3, 4 days, and he would give me little projects to be like, all right, I'm going to teach you how to draw the head, and here, you know, here's how you draw the human head. Here's how I construct my work. Okay, go home and draw a page of heads. Well, I would go home, I'd fill a whole comic book page just full of as many heads as I could, but then I would also do that on the back, and then 2 more pages, and I would bring those in, and because I was like, I am not going to waste this opportunity. I'm going to learn as much as I can from this guy, and show him that I mean business, that I want this, right? And so he would critique it, and Dave is an unbelievable teacher, but he's also, he's very blunt. And so if it sucked, he would just say, this really sucks. Like,
but he says it quietly. He goes, this really sucks. He's got a very soft voice.
So he would just tear my work up, but then he would show me why it was wrong, and kind of show me what I should do better here. And then he would send me home, and I would do the same thing over again and over again and over again. And we did, you know, heads, hands, feet, legs, full bodies, buildings, cars, everything that you need to know. It was like a boot camp. It was like comic book boot camp. Meanwhile, I'm living at my mom's house. I have no job, and I'm really putting all my faith into this one thing. Like, you know, this, and my mom understood, and she was like, I know that this is your dream. You have to just go for it. You have to go for it all out. And so I spent all my days just drawing and working on this stuff. And that was around the time when, I think this was in 2010, when Dave went from Marvel to DC.
Boom.
And so he went to DC, and he wasn't working on any interior projects at the time. He was kind of training me to do some pencil assist stuff with him. And he just said, hey, let's put together a portfolio. I'm not going to need your services. Let's see if we can get you a job. And so we put together a portfolio and sent it in, and you know, I got a job, and I've been working for DC ever since. So
what was that job again? Let's hear about that.
That was the Batman Superman issue 70 and 71, where I came in as a fill-in. And yeah, it was, I had spent, I think the portfolio that I sent in was like 7 pages of comic book storytelling work. And I probably worked 1 week per page, you know, kind of thing, to make it look the best it possibly could. And then all of a sudden it's like, no, you got to draw a page a day, you know? And I remember being so sick, stressed out, sick to my stomach. I felt like, you know, I'd finally given the opportunity, and I'm blowing it. I just wasn't, you know, I couldn't handle the deadline. I did finish the work, even though I had, I think, an inker bail on me at the last minute. I was sending my work to him, and he bailed on me. And so I had to end up calling up the editors and telling them all this. And they really respected that I was filling him in. Like, this inker bailed on me. I had no experience in any of this. Right. And so I finished that book. I remember I had enough money that I made from those books that I bought an engagement ring. I proposed to my wife, thinking, oh, I'm gonna have some work coming in now, and then nothing, you know, nothing. And so it wasn't until, actually, I got my collection of books here. One sec. So actually, a little lesser known fact: the first ever professional work I did was in this book, which is a David Finch X-Men issue. This was right when I was learning from him. I'm trying to find the page here. He had me do, assistant. Yeah, so I did this one panel here, which is Washington, D.C. So this panel here is actually the first professional work I ever did in a
did
comic
you
book.
pencil and ink it, or did he lay it out, or what do you remember about that?
He just had a square there, and he just said, "Draw Washington D.C." And so I penciled it, and and then went back to his house, and he kind of looked at it, and he did a few little tweaks, and he sent the page off to his inker, kind of thing. So, and he wrote me a check and said, "Here you go, here's your first paid work," kind of thing. So
you ain't getting the credit, but here's a check for you.
Yeah. So that's a little secret about my past, is that I have worked for Marvel once.
Yeah.
Not by name, but then the next work I think that came after that Superman Batman was the Animal Man story that was in this Tales of Blackest Night.
I remember that.
Yeah. You did a story, I think, in here.
Yeah. That's how. Did I do a story in there, or did I? I don't remember what that was. Did I write something in there?
I don't know. Your name's on the cover. I think you drew something. I think you did draw a story. But I did an Animal Man story in this issue.
Let me see it. Open it up.
See if I can.
By the way, while you're doing that, I mean, I will say to anyone who's listening, who's following along with this and thinking, wow, he worked really, really hard to get into comics. Maybe I don't need to work as hard as he did. The truth of the matter is, if you don't devote your entire energy into becoming a comic book artist and breaking in the way I did, the way Jason did, you're not going to do it. If this is some kind of flimsy thing that you might want to do, but you're hedging your bets, you're not going to make it. You really do have to make it your life's goal, your mission. You have to put your all into it, because it's competitive, and it takes all of you. So I mean, it's funny to hear your story. It's fascinating. It's exactly what I went through, but I didn't break in it. I mean, you broke in at DC, which is something that I tell people never happens. You usually work your way up from the smaller companies. You went right to DC Comics.
Yeah, so I did have a little deviation. I'll get to it after this, but so this was the Animal Man story that I did, and
oh, look at that! That's very Finchy.
Yeah, and I mean, everything was at this point in time. It was very. Let me see if I can find. There's a couple of cool. This here is one of my favorite pages here, where it's kind of a throwback to a classic Brian Boland cover, and there's a big, I don't know, splash page or whatever there going on
with all the heroes.
Yeah, so I got to draw all the heroes right off the bat. It was kind of cool. Let me see if I can find the one with your story in it. Yeah, here it is. It's towards the back.
Oh, okay, it's in there, right? Yeah, I wrote, penciled, and inked that, and colored it extensively.
Oh wow. Yeah, so very cool stuff. There's another cool page.
All right. Who cares about me? We're here to talk about you.
So I did that story, and then that was when I went. I wasn't getting much work, and Finch was going to I think it was the first year that C2E2 in Chicago. This was like 2010 C2E2. You were there, and he brought me with him, and he said, "Let's bring your portfolio, because I know Aspen Comics will be there, and I know Top Cow will be there. Let's put your portfolio into some of these, see if they'll give you some work." Because he's like, Dave was saying to me, like, you know that you need some time to kind of learn to get your quality and your speed up, and you can't do that at DC. You're just being thrown into, the pan, and all of a sudden you have to, you can't take the heat. So let's go and do something with one of these companies. And so Aspen Comics gave me I worked on Soulfire for them, and I think I did about 8 issues with them, and they were very gracious to just, here, take as much time as you need. But I really challenged myself on trying to meet a monthly deadline. And at first I couldn't. I think it took me 2 months to draw the first issue I did. But then eventually I got it down to 1 month. I could draw the book in 1 month, and I learned kind of what I needed to cut out of my work, and where to kind of go with it. And I think that was around the time I started doing most of my stuff digitally, which I felt really helped me speed up my work process.
Why is that?
Well, when I was at the animation college, I did a lot of stuff digitally, and so I knew the tools, I knew the kind of the programs and whatnot. I just feel I can be a little bit more messy with digital. I can rough out all my stuff, and if I don't like it, I just turn that layer off or whatever, you know. And I'm not ruin. I kind of get. It's weird, but I kind of, when I'm drawing on paper, I don't like smudging it. I don't like scratching into the artboard. I just have like this weird kind of OCD thing about it.
Mm-hmm.
And even now, when I draw traditionally, I'm roughing everything out in the computer, printing it off, and then light tabling, you know, the inks over top of it when I do covers and splash pages and stuff. That's how I do it, so that I have all my roughs have been worked out digitally, and then I'm doing all the clean work on the paper, and I don't have to guess. It's just all right there. But that's when I kind of made that shift, and I found by doing that, I was able to really increase my speed and increase my quality, and I was becoming more and more happy with how the work was turning out. And then that's kind of when I was asked to do the Dark Knight books with Finch. He was moving on to do New 52 stuff, and he needed to fill in for 2 issues. And so I came in and I did issues 4 and 5. And I remember I had only handed in a couple pages of this book when Mike Martz called me up and said, "Hey, do you want to sign an exclusive with DC?" And so, you know, I think he had seen, like, you know, that I was working hard and I was doing decent work for the time, and I was making the deadline.
And you could see the potential in those books. I mean, you really could. You could see where you were going to go, but you went there so fast from there.
Mm-hmm.
You were still very much David Finch's pupil in those books.
Yeah, and that was one thing I really struggled with, is like David taught me how to draw like David Finch.
Mm-hmm.
And I used to say to him, like, "Dave, you know, everybody's just going to see me as a Finch clone. You know, they're not going to take me seriously." And Dave said, well, he said, "Here's the thing." He's like, "When I started, I was taught by, now his name's skipping my mind.
Silvestri. Mark Silvestri.
Silvestri.
Yeah.
He was like, you know, I was taught by him, and my work looked like Mark Silvestri. And, you know, he's like, it took me about 5 years to get to the point where I really started to find my look and my style." But the interesting thing he said to me is, like, he said, "Don't think of it like it's a negative that you're a copy of me." He said, "Because the art style that I draw is very popular and it sells books." And he said, "You know, you can try and draw like other artists, and maybe they're more funky, more original looking. But," he's like, the big 2 companies want artists that look a certain way that they know can sell books." He's like, "It's all that matters, selling books." So he's like, if you can draw like Jim Lee, you can draw like David Finch, Ethan Van Sciver, Gary Frank, if you can draw like the big guys, then you won't have any trouble ever finding work. And he was right, because I've never, ever once, after those first couple issues, once I kind of got in the groove and was doing some stuff with Aspen, that's when DC really started to come after me. And ever since then, I've never looked for work. And so even though, yeah, my work was a clone of Dave's, he told me, he says, it'll take you a couple of years, but then your style will kind of move into its own thing, and you'll start absorbing other influences into your work, and you'll go away from my style. It'll kind of always kind of be the foundation, but you know, your work will kind of have its own thing after a while. And he was right. It happened. It's taken years to kind of get there, but
first time I saw your work, that because I've been watching you, I knew who you were, but the first time I saw something of yours that absolutely took my breath away, and I had to actually contact you and let you know, was a Deathstroke cover. Do you know the one I'm talking about?
Yeah, yeah.
And I went,
Deathstroke number 8.
Yeah, okay. I said, this guy just suddenly jumped into hyperdrive all of a sudden, because I'd seen all of your work up till then. And then when I saw that, I was like, okay, he's actually, you see somebody just hit it and then next level. And that's what that cover was. And from there on, you have been getting steadily and steadily more impressive. At what point did Jeff Johns go, because that's what Jeff does. Jeff kind of looks around and he goes, Jeff can have his pick. All right. So he looks around and he looks at the artist and he goes, this guy right here. So when did that happen? And tell me about that. Okay.
So that was probably, it would have been like maybe 3 years now. But I worked on, after I did the Dark Knight issues, they asked me to do Detective Comics. So I drew Detective Comics for about a year. And then they offered me to do some of the Batman Eternal issues. So I got to do issues 1, 2, and 3 of Batman Eternal, which I felt was a good career move. It was kind of getting some more eyes on my work. But because that book was a weekly, you could only do like one issue here and there because they had a whole ton of artists that were coming in and doing a bunch of issues, right? And so I remember I called Dan DiDio. I had the gut. Dave Finch told me, just call Dan DiDio and tell him what you want. I said, well, I've never even talked to Dan DiDio before. I'm supposed to, call the head honcho and tell him what I want. So, but I did. I called Dan, and I told him, I said, I want to take that next step. I want something different. I want something big. I would like to do Justice League. And at the time, Ivan Rice was doing Justice League, and he said, well, he's like, I don't know if that's the right fit right now, but he's like, I'll keep it in mind. Keep working on what you're doing. We'll find you something. And maybe it was a couple of months later. I remember it. I was laying in bed. It was 11 o'clock at night Eastern time. All of a sudden, I get this text on my phone. It was Jeff Johns, but because he's on Western time, right? It's all it's what it's 8 o'clock or whatever his time. And so he's like, hey, are you up? I need to talk to you. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like what is he like? I was freaked out. I don't know. I was like, what does he want? I have never talked really to Jeff. I had met him a couple times before at the summit meeting or something that we did. So he calls me that night. He didn't call me for like another hour. So it was like midnight. So I'm freaking out. Don't know what he's going to say. And so he calls me up and he's, tells me that he really likes my work. And he's like, I think that you'd be a great fit on Justice League. I want to do something, this Dark Side War thing. But first let's start off on something a little more simple and then we'll move into that. And I asked him, I said, how I'm just curious, like why me? Did you talk to Dan DiDio? And he said, no, I never talked to Dan. He's like, it was actually Brian Cunningham who had kind of suggested that I take a look at your work, and he says I looked at it and there was like an image of Wonder Woman that I had drawn as part of my portfolio that I handed in at DC that I look back on it now and it looks it's awful, but he looked at it and that one image sold him on it. He said, like, I know you can draw a great Wonder Woman, and that's the story I want to tell is a Wonder Woman centric story. And so, yeah, and then that's how we started working together and did Justice League together.
It's funny that I find that's kind of the way Dan DiDio operates is. You'll put a bug in his ear and he'll almost never give you what you want right away. It takes a little while for him to stew on it, and then he comes back at you with it later. So he'll know if you say, I want to do Justice League, unless you're Jim Lee, you know what I mean? He's going to say, okay, well, let me think about it for a little while. And then you're probably going to be made happy a little bit later. He did the same thing to me with Hal Jordan and the Green Lantern Corps. I actually named that book. I said, I want this book to be called Hal Jordan and the Green Lantern Corps. And he said, no. And then 2 months later, there was Hal Jordan and the Green Lantern Corps, and I was on it. It's like, it's a funny little thing about Dan.
Interesting. Yeah, interesting. But yeah. So like that's when I started on Justice League. And the first stuff we did was a mesovirus.
Look at that.
And I still really love that cover with the hazard.
You drew that by hand because I saw that original in Florida with you.
Yeah. I all the covers I've done. There's another one, the Justice League, and then we started. That's when we started doing Dark Side War, and that whole series. And this was the story that Jeff had pitched me on the phone. But I was a little scared because I said, you know, I've never drawn a team book. Like I don't know if I can just jump into a massive, you know, team book. And so that's why we did the Amazo virus first, which was the small story. It was just the Trinity really and Lex Luthor and we and he ramped it up. The first issue was very simple, and then he slowly ramped up the number of characters in each issue. And so it got me kind of prepared for drawing all of these characters in panels. And by the end of that issue, it's just that story is just a full-blown fight between all these characters. And so I learned what not to draw, what to draw, how to cut corners, how to fake things, use silhouettes, use different things like that.
To meet those deadlines. Did you meet the deadlines?
Yeah. I met every deadline on Justice League, including the final issue, which was issue 50. This was like one of my great victories in comics, because this issue I had gotten the script late from Jeff, and it was a 40-pager and it turned into a 44-pager. But the thing was that they were, when this issue, while I was working on this, they were getting ready for the DC Rebirth stuff, and this issue had to come out before the DC Universe Rebirth #1 that you did, and with Gary Frank and Phil Jimenez,
right?
You know, so this had to come out, and I remember looking at the schedule, and I only had 30 days to draw 44 pages, and I remember seeing Dan DiDio at WonderCon, and he looked me in the eye and he said, "Jay, I'm scared that you're not going to be able to get that book done. We're going to have to get a fill-in." And I looked him back in the eye and I said, "Dan, I will finish that book on time. I will finish that book on time." And I was like, I don't know if I could ever do it again, because I just became, I don't know, like I just became a machine. I was just pumping out pages like it was nothing. But I was just working like all day, getting up at 6 a.m., going to bed at 10 a.m., but just drawing. I was sore. My back was killing me. My hands wanted to fall off.
How does your wife respond to this kind of
Well,
schedule?
at that time, I sat down with her and I said, "Sarah, I have to do this. This is one of those books. I have never had a fill-in on a book. I'm not going to let the last issue of this series, the ending of a story, be filled with other people's artwork. I need to finish this. And if I do this, it will make me a hero in the eyes of Dan DiDio and of Jeff Johns." And it did. I completed that book on time. And I remember like Brian Cunningham like saying to me, like, "I've never seen anything like that. Like, I've never seen somebody draw that many pages in that little time, and to the degree that I drew them to." And I mean, with digital, you can cut some corners. So a lot of the backgrounds and stuff is just fire and smoke. So what I did was I just drew a couple different fire and smoke panels, you know, in high detail, and then just literally stuck them in the background of most of the panels, because it's just a lot of destruction. So then I could just focus on the characters. And, you know, I don't know. I still don't know how I actually completed that book, because ever since then I've become more lazy. I just sit there and think, like, I don't want to ever do that again. Like, it was insane. But I think that by doing that, like I said, I think that really won me a lot of points in the eyes of DC Comics, and I've, you know, it's kind of allowed me to call some shots now, you know, when it comes to what I want to work on and how much I want to work, you know. So yeah, but you know, Justice League, that was awesome. I really had a good time on that series. I wish I could have kept going on it, but Jeff and I kind of felt they were switching to I think the bi-weekly schedule, and I said to Jeff, "I don't want to do that." And he said, "Well, if you're going to leave, I'm going to leave too. I want to just work on it with you." And so we both left the book. And you know.
Any regrets now or no?
No.
Or you're done?
Yeah, we're you know, there will be more projects with Jeff in the future. You know, once he gets in time from the movie stuff. So we'll team up on something and maybe we'll do Justice League in the future. I don't know.
Would it be Justice League, or is there something else that
there's something else, but I can't really say what it is. Because I don't even know when that might all come about. That's the only thing.
I think I know what it is.
Because right now Jeff he's so focused on the movies, and that's where he needs to be right now, and that's what he needs to do. And but that's allowed me to kind of work on some other cool stuff like the button Batman 21.
All right, this is the book we're talking about now. So basically, we're up to this point in your career now. Now, this is when I heard about this. Honestly, you've got DC's two biggest characters, their two biggest hero franchises, Flash and Batman. Put them together in a book with this little symbol right here. Mm-hmm. It was the biggest thing imaginable. So this is your reward, I think, for completing Justice League 50.
Yep, I think it was. After Justice League, I had taken a couple months off. I think I took 2 or 3 months off. And then I did an issue of Justice League versus Suicide Squad, which kind of was their big event that was going to happen at that time. And that was December of last year. So it was about a year ago. So they had asked me to do that, and I said, yeah, I didn't want to jump into a monthly, and I didn't want to go hardcore with a deadline. So I did that issue, and then I was kind of just waiting. I decided, you know what? I worked really hard this year. I'm making a lot of my money off of royalties, so I didn't feel I need to just jump on a book and on a series and just go nuts again, because I was kind of burnt. To be honest, I was burnt out after Justice League. I was so tired, and I didn't really know if I wanted to keep doing the hardcore deadline thing. And but that's when Mark Doyle, who was the editor, the Batman editor at the time, he had called me up and said, "Look," he says, I know that you don't want to go on to a monthly or anything, but we want you on this book." And it's the way he had pitched it is he originally just said it's a Batman Flash crossover. And I said, okay, what's going to be special about this? And he said, well, it's got to do with the Watchmen. so I said, okay, that's pretty.
You had gotten to draw Batman and Flash already in Justice League, so just the two of them together was no big deal to you.
Yeah,
you needed that extra element.
But then when they said the Watchmen, that sold me. And he says, remember in Rebirth they mentioned how Batman found the button in his Bat Cave? Well, that's what this story is going to kind of explore, and it's going to eventually lead into Doomsday Clock with Jeff Johns. So, yeah, that was kind of how they pitched the story to me, and I said, yeah, okay, let's do that. I think that will be a lot of fun. And so yeah, that's where this is. And
is that 21 too? I've got the cool cover. What does that cover?
This one is a Tim Sale one, Tim Sale variant. I have all of my book, and I have them all saved and put away. I don't want to damage them. But this one I was using for reference to look back on some of the things.
I just got yelled at in the chat for like treating the book this way. They're like, stop holding the book that way. I'm like, the comic books. What did you do?
Oh man, if fans could see the books I have kind of sitting here by the side of my table that are all damaged and beat up because I use them as reference. But yeah, so this was this book, and
crack it open.
Yeah, so Tom King wrote this, and I remember talking with him, and he said, Watchmen was done in a 9-panel grid style. So I want that to be this book. I want it to be all 9-panel grids, or most of the book be 9-panel grids. And I remember at the time the deadline for this one was actually going to be pretty tight. I really only had a month to draw it. And I said to him, I don't know if I could make deadline if every page is going to be 9-panel grids. I just, that's a lot of drawing that you have to do. And so originally he had kind of changed some of the stuff in the script. But then as we were going through the book, I realized I actually really liked the 9-panel grid, and I was really getting into it. And so I said, let's add more, let's add more, let's add more. So that's kind of how we started. But, it opens up with this hockey scene, which he which was kind of fun that he wrote some hockey into this book, because
you're a hockey player.
I'm a hockey player and I'm a hockey fan. A little secret about this was this actually wasn't the opening of the book. The book actually opened with 2 9-panel grid pages, but I can't divulge what was on those pages because those pages might actually be used in something coming up, maybe in Doomsday Clock. Jeff really liked the sequence or something, and he wanted to use it, or they want to use it in something else. So it was actually, I had drawn the pages, and it was a really cool sequence that kind of was it was actually a scene from Watchmen, but reimagined in a different way. It was really cool, but sadly, I don't know if it'll ever see the light of day. Maybe once those pages are actually published, or that storyline is published, then maybe it will be. But so Tom actually changed the intro, and I think I actually drew the intro last because we had changed it up.
Mercifully, it's not 9-panel grid for the intro.
Yeah. So we had decided, let's start it off and slowly build up into the 9-panel grid. So we have this hockey sequence, and these characters are the inmates at Arkham or whatever are watching this hockey game, and Saturn Girl is she knows the future, and so she's saying, oh, this is the game where the guy kills the other hockey player in the fight or whatever. And again, we start off with this circle here, and then the stick comes in, which is supposed to almost represent like the blood splatter on the button. Like it's that's kind of what he had written in the script. Like, I want the stick to kind of come in so it angles the way that the blood splatter,
or Professor Zoom's lightning bolt.
Yeah, that too. Could be that too. So that's kind of what that is a play on. And one thing I tried to do with this hockey sequence too was actually draw it like you would actually see a hockey broadcast. One of the things that I'm always annoyed about in comic books and even in movies and media is whenever they show sports games, it's like as if it's filmed professionally on a set. There's always cameras like down at ice level following the players along. And yeah, that's more dynamic for a comic book. But in my mind, if Batman's and these people are watching it on TV, it should actually look like a TV broadcast. That's just the way I think. So I really tried to make the sequence like a TV broadcast of a hockey game. And so here in this panel is the first time you see the smiley face.
Yeah.
And I think from here on out, every page has a smiley face. If most of them have the smiley face.
Is that right?
Yeah, it might be. I don't know. Yeah. Maybe there's a couple in there that don't. But the smiley face kind of starts. You can see it here behind her, and she's freaking out, and the inmates are all freaking out because she's saying, I can't really read it because it's backwards on my screen, but
she's saying, "Stop it! Can't you see? Nothing stops it. Superman won't come. Our friends will die. The Legion will die. No one will stop it." And then from the screen it says, "You never know what will happen."
Yeah. So there's that little intro sequence, which I'm sure the whole Saturn Girl thing is going to be touched on. Maybe in Doomsday Clock they'll touch on that. But then we go to this. This is one of my favorite pages. And I think the script said something like Batman's watching the computer screen, and he's got the hockey game on, and he's got the news and a couple other things. And on some of his other screens around his computer is a close-up of the button, like as if he's studying it. And so I added more screens, and I made it, so that you had just a ridiculous amount of computer screens. I mean, nobody really needs that many computer screens, but I always think that Batman's computer looks cool when he's got 20 different screens going on. But I really just wanted that the computer kind of is in the background of most of the shots, and so I wanted it always to seem like the button was looking down at them. Like as this whole sequence is going on, the button's always kind of watching them.
How about that? That's terrific. Where do you get your Batcave from? Is this Dave Finch's Batcave?
Part of the computer, like I use a lot of 3D models and reference for my work. And I think my brother actually, my brother's a professional 3D modeler for Ubisoft, the video game studio up in Toronto. And so he does all the 3D models for all the characters and stuff. And so he had actually built some Batman Batcave stuff, some platforms and some computers and whatnot. And so I use a lot of that stuff to get my reference from. And so I think that's what the computer is. And but I don't know. Look, when it comes to, I don't think I've ever drawn the Batcave the same twice. Every time I draw it, it's something different. And I remember DC during New 52 kind of said, this is what the Batcave is supposed to look like. I don't think I ever used it. I was just kind of make up.
I wonder when they get rigid like that. Yeah. I wonder if anybody cares or notices, or if that's a good thing or a bad thing. I like them saying Batman gets in the bat plane and I can choose the bat plane that I want to draw, and nobody ever complains.
No,
it's just
I think
he's got a million of everything.
Yeah, I think that was one of my favorite things about Batman, is that each artist kind of brings their own thing to it, so they can have their own Batmobile and their own bat plane and their own Batcave and whatever. I've always liked that. So now we get into the 9-panel grids. And so
this is brutal. I looked at this again today, anticipating this interview. This hockey fight is devastating. It's really well choreographed, and it looks like it hurts.
Yeah, and a lot of this was, I looked up reference. I watched a lot of hockey fights. I've seen a ton of hockey fights in my life, so I kind of know how they happen. And so the interesting thing was that Tom has this sequence going on where Batman is flipping the button in his fingers. And so, the script said something like, Batman's holding the button, and then 2 panels later, it's like Batman starting to flip the button in his fingers, and every other panel, the button is onto the next finger, up onto his knuckle, onto the next finger. And so I remember watching like a video online of somebody doing the coin flip and then pausing it and taking like a screenshot so that I could have reference for how the coin actually moves when somebody's doing a, flipping a coin over their fingers. And so, that's how kind of I got that reference. And it's essentially the same arm, and I just redrew the hand, and the background is just the stat panel, but I just would redraw the hand and the button, for each one. So, that helped me save some time. And then the panels in between is of the Bat computer, and Batman's watching the screen. And so, here I needed to establish, where Batman is, where he's watching, he's specifically looking at the screen with the hockey game going on. And again, this is, the hockey game is always like as if you would actually see a real broadcast where the camera is pulled back. And so then here we notice that it starts to zoom in. Like each panel of the hockey game, it slowly is zooming in closer and closer and closer, so that it's not just a stagnant camera here and then a stagnant camera here. It's like this is always moving while this is stagnant. And I just felt that would kind of add something to it, because I knew what was going on the screen was just from a broadcast camera. So I had to do something to kind of make it a little more exciting. So,
very smart, very smart. I love the slow zoom.
Yeah. So slowly zooming,
static.
This guy takes his head off. There's a, big elbow to the face, which is actually based off of a famous elbow of when Pavel Bure, I forget which guy, Shane Churla or something like that, in the 1996 playoffs. When you're a kid in Canada watching these videos called Don Cherry's Rock'em Sock'em, used to always have all the best hits and the best fights and stuff. So a lot of these panels are actually based off of like some of the best fights and stuff in history. But so the guy gets hit, then the guy drops the gloves, they start fighting, and anybody who's watched hockey knows that as soon as the fight starts, all of a sudden the camera's right in on the 2 fighters. And so so that's why here all of a sudden the camera has changed, because in a hockey fight you zoom right in on the fighters. And this guy's wearing number 93, which is the number that if I was a professional I would always wear. I would wear myself at number 93. I don't know. It was Doug Gilmour's number, played for the Toronto Maple Leafs, but that's why I put that there. It's kind of like my little shout out to myself. And actually there's 2 of my buddies that I from where I'm at here, John Farfanick and Jimmy Bungay. I asked them if they could put their names in this panel here. It says 2-on-1 break, Farfanick to Bungay, back to Farfanick, and so that was kind of my little shout out to my buddies, because we play hockey.
You gotta do that.
Yeah,
you gotta do that when you can.
That's kind of nice. So they get in this fight, and it's the Gotham Blades versus the Metropolis Mammoths. And so the interesting thing about that was that I was just goofing around and designing some hockey jerseys for these fake, fictional NHL teams. And I think that's where Tom King saw this, and then he wrote this scene so that we could make those jerseys like actual legit, DC Universe jerseys. And so that's where those designs come from. So it continues. The two guys are fighting, and Tom King's, sometimes he just writes like just a one line. It's like, they keep fighting, it gets bloodier. They fight some more, it's getting even more bloodier. He's on top, players on top of him, just pounding his face in. It's getting more and more violent, and the guy's bleeding all over the ground, and the other player just isn't letting up. It was supposed to be kind of foreshadowing what was going to happen in the issue, which is Batman's going to get beat up by Reverse Flash. And so this is the foreshadowing of that actually happening in the issue. And so,
I like the smiley face button being flipped around in the second to last panel when we see the guy's face fully and we just see blood gushing out of his head.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a nice little and look, the smiley face is pretty much on the same level as the head, the bleeding guy's face. So that's a nice bit of work there.
Yeah, I have to say I didn't really think that's just coincidence. I wasn't really thinking about that, in all honesty. But hey,
really, really great. I mean,
it works.
Yeah.
So so then we go to the next page, and this is where Batman, he turns off the screen. We have a silent page. There's no dialogue. He flips the button down, and so I wanted to kind of get that effect, like it's bouncing down onto the thing, and he walks away from where the button is.
They should have color held these then. I have to say, it looks like he's throwing 4 buttons.
Yeah, they probably could have. Yeah, probably could have. So then he leaves the.
You draw a great Batman.
Oh, thanks. Thank you.
One of the best Batman that DC publishes. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so the button's laying next to the Psycho Pirate's mask, which I guess it reacts with the button. Sometimes I don't really know what's going on, but I just take it that the guys who are writing it know what they're talking about. And and so then you get this cool lightning bolt effect that spreads across the 3 panels, and I made it so that the lightning bolt actually goes over the panel border and then under the panel border to kind of create a 3D effect. I don't know. Just sometimes you just play with little things to see if it'll work. And I think it kind of worked with that panel. I could have made I could have actually had the pirate's mask, Psycho Pirate's mask, actually on top.
Out over the border.
Yeah, I could have done that too. But that wasn't really the main focus. I think I wanted the viewer to focus on that line, that lightning bolt, coming out of the button and hitting Batman. And then we get this sequence here where he sees the ghost of his father, of Thomas Wayne, and he reaches out and he can't touch his hand because he's I guess he's like a vision or a ghost. And that's when we start to we bring in the Flash and the whole element of the Flash. And so he calls Barry, and Barry's fighting the Samuroids, and which is like
was that in a Flash book?
I guess. I don't know. I don't really know too much about the Flash, but I remember Tom King saying, yeah, I think old school Flash fans will get the reference or something like that. Kind of a callback to something.
Oh, I see.
And then that's when the Flash kind of says, look, it's going to take me about 1 minute to get there. I need 1 more minute to beat these guys, and then I'll get there. So that's when our countdown clock starts. And so from here on out, the whole book, the 9-panel grid is used in a way that we can tell time. It becomes all about telling time. it's a second by second kind of countdown to when the flash will actually arrive. And so here, so one thing that's happening here is the camera. I had the camera angle. There's like a rule in storytelling where you don't want to. It's called like the line of action, and so you set up your camera like as if you're on a stage, and you always, if Batman's on the left side of the page or the left side of the camera, you always want to make sure that he's always on that side so that you don't confuse your viewer. But I thought, what if when the reverse flash shows up, we all of a sudden reverse the line of action because he's the reverse flash. So on these pages here, the camera angle is looking down from this way, at Batman. From here on out, it's going to reverse, like as if the camera was on the other side. And so I did that as just a little kind of thing to kind of make you feel uneasy. And so the lightning bolts behind Batman, and he thinks it's the Flash who's arrived early, but then we get this big 2-page spread of reverse Flash punching Batman. With
a great line of dialogue, too.
Yeah, he says quite the reverse, actually.
Oh, just great.
Yeah. So, but here, like normally you'd probably want that punch to come left to right. But I decided, because he's the reverse Flash, I'm going to have it come right to left. And I think it actually works better with this way because of the fact that when you turn the page, I don't know if I can do it here, but when you turn the page, it's like as if the punch comes across, boom,
That works great. Did you hand draw this 2-page spread?
Yeah, this page is a hand-drawn one.
I can tell.
Yeah,
I don't know how I can tell, but I can just tell.
Yeah. So that one, boom, you got this big punch. And then from here, we have the countdown clock. It's starting to go. And, the reverse. So see here, now the camera is going the opposite. It's the opposite direction that it was a couple panels before.
What do you mean?
Instead of looking from here, it's it's looking down to the left. Now the camera is actually now going to be starting on this side, which is looking down to the right side of Batman's computer.
Got it.
So it's like as if I took the cameras and I reversed them, all the camera angles. And so, I really enjoyed this panel here with reverse Flash, just the way I got the shadows. I was really trying to, I don't know. One thing I really like to do is, it's something that Gary Frank does a lot, is that he always uses like a 2-point light. So I'll never just have one shadow and have a hard shadow, like the light on one side and a hard shadow. I'll always add a rim light, because I feel like with the coloring that people can do today, like, Brad Anderson, who's colored almost all my work for the last 3 or 4 years, he colors Gary Frank stuff. And that was the one thing I always really liked about how he colors Gary Frank, is that he always adds that rim light. And usually it's a different color, or it's a hard white. It's something, and it just adds so much dimension to the face. The face isn't flat anymore. It becomes a 3-dimensional thing. And that was always one of my tests when I was working with colorists before. I would always get so angry because they would never put that rim light in there. And I used to say to them, like, put the rim light in there. I want a rim light. And if they couldn't put the rim light in properly, then I wanted a different color. It's like, I don't know. That's just one thing I think should be, if the artist is leaving a room for rim light, then put it in. And Brad just understands how to light a face so well, that he was able to do that. And here's an example of something that I did with digital, is that there's like that zoomy effect, and so I drew the reverse Flash once and then just duplicated him, and I was able to make the see-through kind of effect where Batman's jumping through him, and I just hand the file to the colorist and broken down into different layers so that he can turn on and off the opacity to make it look like it's, you know, like as if he's phasing and Batman's jumping right through him, kind of thing.
Son of a gun! I actually had to hand draw on my reverse flash double images. See,
Yeah,
that's the advantage there.
Yeah, that's one of the advantages. And then we come to this page, which I think is my favorite page in the whole book. This punch, and you'll notice that it reverse flash, like he punches Batman 3 times within 1 second, actually 4 times within 1 second. Originally, I don't think it was like that in the book. I think he ended up changing the timing of it so that the time he gave it so that it gives that really cool effect. But the story behind this page is that I was running out of time, and I knew this page was going to take forever because I had to draw 9 panels of Batman getting punched, and I couldn't just do all close-ups. And so I said, what if I do some silhouette panels every other panel? And we just have this stark yellow, because that seems to be the theme of this book, is like the yellow button, reverse flashes in yellow, the Watchmen covers, they're in yellow. So, or like the classic Watchmen in yellow. So let's just put yellow and black with the red lightning bolts, you know, kind of, you know, and blood, the silhouette of the blood splatter. And so that's, you know, that's how that page came. And I'm usually opposed to using a lot of silhouette panels like this, but it just worked really well on this page. And I think it made for a really nice kind of, as a whole, the page kind of has a symmetry to it. And
it's Frank Miller. You did a Frank Miller page, essentially.
Yeah, that's kind of what it is, I guess. So I just really liked how that turned out. And I ended up using this silhouette kind of thing a couple times after that in this issue. But yeah, you know, it's hard to come up with 9 different panels of somebody getting punched in the face. Like, how do you change him up? How do you make him different? So, but I you know.
And eventually he dies. I mean, it's like a guy getting hit this hard, this fast. Like, geez, I mean, you've got Batman coughing up gallons of blood here.
Yeah, which probably isn't realistic, but we really just wanted to push the fact that this is, and you know what? In all honesty, like I'm actually I'm opposed to showing a lot of graphic violence in comics. Like, I don't mind it if like there's some blood, you know, because I mean that's realistic. But you know, I don't want to draw people getting their heads ripped off just for the sake of doing that, you know. But yeah. I felt that this story needed that. Like this story needed to have the violence and the blood just ramping up and up and up and up, because then there's a payoff at the end, kind of thing, you know.
Does it hurt you when you do it? When you're drawing it, are you like, you know, like, is it painful?
I don't know. I don't think it's painful, but because one of the things that I've always kind of tried to do is I've always tried to say to myself, if, you know, the projects that I work on and projects that I shouldn't be working on, is if I would be embarrassed to show this to my grandma, then maybe I shouldn't be working on it. Like if the subject matter, if the images I'm drawing would be something that I would be embarrassed to show my grandma, then maybe I shouldn't work on that book, because it might not be appropriate. It might not fall in line with what I believe and the values that I want, you know, that I believe. You know, I don't want to be a hypocrite when it comes to that stuff. So that's kind of how I've navigated a lot of the projects that I worked on. Is that, but I felt, again, this was one of those books where it was just like, this book, the violence needs to happen because this is how it would actually be. If Reverse Flash is fighting Batman, well, let's just be honest, you know, he would be so fast, he would just be pummeling him. And this is how a person would look if they're getting beat down by you know, 4 fists in a second. You know, your face would be all smashed up.
Yep.
So then now we get to this panel here, and you notice that the screens, you can see the computer screens, and the button is smiling, you know, button smiling down at them. And Batman spits in the Reverse Flash's face. And if you notice here in this panel, this one right here, the blood, the way that the blood is kind of falling down on his eyes is
nice.
It's subtle. I didn't want to make it too in your face, but just kind of, it's subtle that it's the way that it's the same blood from on the button.
Did he ask for that? Did Tom ask for that, or was that your inspiration?
No, I think that was me. I don't know. Maybe it was in the script, but and you also notice that it's the reverse. It's not the same way. So it's the reverse. Everything's in the reverse, right? So, so then we get the sequence where I had to draw the Flash rushing Batman across the Batcave, and he's gonna throw him into one of those like pod things that he has the costume. Batman always has all of his costumes on display.
This is the most impressive 3 panels to me, by the way. I saw that and went, wow, that's smoking hot. And I mean, it's something that readers will just kind of pass through, but it is incredibly difficult to draw that, and for almost no payoff. Like something like this looks really cool, but it's kind of easy. This is incredibly difficult, and you did a great job. I mean, it's really fun to look at. Cheers.
No, thanks. And this was a panel where it was hard. It's like, how do I show this? How do I show that he rushes him halfway across the cave, you know? And I think I went through a couple different variations of it, but then because I always wanted it to be kind of exciting, but I thought, you know, the easiest way, the way I try to go about storytelling is just to keep it simple. I don't use crazy layouts in my comics. I like my comics to just be very simple and easy to read so that anybody can pick it up and read it. Like that's just kind of the keep it simple, stupid, you know, version of comic books. Like just keep it simple so that, because, you know, there's always that famous saying that every comic book is somebody's first, you know, kind of thing. You got to treat it like as if, you know, this is somebody's first comic. And so you kind of want it easy to read so that they know what's going on. And so, so he rushes him, he throws him into this glass, and on the glass is a note, which was from Flashpoint. I think it's from Flashpoint that Thomas Wayne had written to give to Batman. He'd given it to Flash to give to Batman. So that's been in the cave, and so that's what he picks up, and Reverse Flash reads it, and so we have this sequence here where he's angry at Thomas Wayne because Thomas Wayne had stabbed him or something like that, and so he rips apart the thing. And again, I just drew different hands on different layers. Heck, I think they're just copied because I'm lazy like that. And so then it just copied the same hands, drew them on different layers, and then Brad could kind of make them look like they're see-through. And then again, we go to this yellow kind of in the background. Like,
I can't tell you how much I love that.
Yeah, just to kind of, originally I think I'd drawn a background, and I thought it's taking away, it's distracting from the paper, the paper floating through the air. And so I just thought, what if we just stick yellow back there? Then the reader 100% knows what's going on, because I just felt like it would look a little too blank if there was, you know, if we tried to put the Bat Cave or something in the background. This just really says to the reader, this is an important moment. You know,
this is as violent. This sequence is as violent as these other yellow panels to me. That's what it kind of says to me. This is violence happening at the hands of Reverse Flash. It's inspired. It's good stuff.
Yeah, and Reverse Flash has destroyed the note, which is the only thing that Bruce Wayne kind of has from his father, right? So that was something that he really cherished, and so this is important that he's ripped it up, because now Batman's angry. You know, he's angry. He's like, you know, get out of my cave, and Reverse Flash is kind of mocking him, and again, I had to get. These are things that you don't really think about when you're reading the comic, but like Flash is here, he's on the other side, and I needed him to move to the other side of Batman, because eventually they're going to race back towards the Bat computer. So, you know, you have to kind of, so I had it so the Reverse Flash, now he's coming around, so he's on the other side of Batman. And so, you know, those are things you have to be reading the script and thinking where these people are in space, you know, to each other, because I knew I had to get them out from the computer over to the little area where there's the costumes on that platform, but then I have to get them back to the Bat computer. So I have to have Reverse Flash come around and you know, he's kind of mocking him, so he comes around walking, and that's when Batman pulls out his Batarang here and stabs it into his foot to kind of hold him in place, so that Batman can get a couple licks in on him. And so he punches him a couple times, but
not enough.
Yeah, it's not enough because the Reverse Flash just claps his hands, boom, and Batman goes flying back. And again, this is he goes flying, and now he's flying backwards into the computer. I think I originally had this panel a pulled back shot of showing him flying across, but I just didn't get the right feeling from it. I just felt I needed a big shot of him smashing into the computer and glass shards kind of falling all over the place. And so then Reverse Flash, you know, he kind of phases, you know, through the Batarang, which was kind of painful to draw because I have a thing about, I'm always scared I'm going to step on a nail or something, you know, on my foot. Like, I don't know, just kind of, you know. So then, you know, we have the stare down shot where Batman's kind of looking at him across. And again, I used a silhouette. Sometimes you just want to draw attention to the guy in the background. So, you know, so you use a silhouette to, you know, to make sure that the viewer is paying attention to what you really want them to pay attention to. And this is the classic kind of, you know, creating a frame or a border, you know, kind of way of composition. There's like that famous, it was a Wally Wood. He had like the famous like panels. Like if you just draw a comic book with using all these styles of panels, it'll always look visually exciting kind of thing. And that's one of them, is to use that technique. So now we have this close up, and we're zooming in on Batman as he's getting ready. He says, I just need 11 seconds. And so now the countdown's on. Reverse Flash is, you know, he's going to kill, but he wants to kill Batman. So he races in. This is a classic kind of shot I use a lot, which is the low to the floor with the foot in the foreground. Whenever I'm lost, I'm like, well, what kind of panel do I use here to get this point across? I always seem to go back to that
worm's eye view.
Close up of the worm's eye view, close up of the foot, so that you can see the character moving in the background towards our character. So Batman tries to punch him.
Here, hang on, Jason. Somebody said every now and then people can donate money just to have their comment read. It's called a super chat. So a fellow named Vendon Singh said, I love you, Jason Fabok. You're an inspiration, and so are you, Ethan. Seems like you were nice enough to get him based on requests. Absolutely, we'll watch it all after school. Super chat for support. Love you. Thank you, Benton.
Awesome.
Okay, I'm sorry. Continue.
That's great. So then we got, you know, Batman. He tries to throw a punch, but Reverse Flash phases through that. Again, I use the same kind of technique there with the phasing. And then we go back to these yellow panels here. But instead of the silhouette, I chose to actually draw it in full detail so that you get 100% the sense of what's going on. And then here it's a reverse of kind of this shot where this is the close-up of Batman's foot. Now we get a close-up of the fist of the Reverse Flash, and now Batman's in the background and he's injured. Reverse Flash races at him. We get a big punch in the face. Batman's going to kind of get the upper hand. Now we got the reverse of that panel. So now it's Batman's fist and Reverse Flash is on the ground, kind of in the reverse position. But now he runs in and he gets the better of Batman. 2 seconds left. He's just pummeling Batman. Batman's, you know, he's not having a very good day.
Wow.
And then we kind of end the 9-panel kind of pages here with 1 second left. He picks him up. And I thought this was so great because this line wasn't actually in the original script, but because it ends with 1 second and Batman's still alive, he laughs and says it's overtime, which is what was happening in the hockey game. In the hockey game, it was an overtime game that was happening, and so he says overtime. You know, he's all bloodied up, and boom, we get the big punch where Batman's
the kill shot.
Ragdoll. Yeah, Batman's going to go into ragdoll mode and just fall over. And he's got glass shards stuck in his back. So he's pretty messed up. So then we go back to the 9-panel pages, which, again, I think is just to slow things down. the fight's over. We're gonna use the 9 panels now to slow things down so that you have to take your time and read each panel. And so now the reverse flash, he approaches the button, he picks it up, and I pretty much use a stat panel for the next few here as he disappears. And we have the same panel, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 panels of the same thing, just to denote that time is passing. Who knows? Maybe it's a minute has gone by, but time is passing. He's knocked out. The button is still, the smiley face is still looking down at the whole situation. And then that's when, boom, he comes back and he's burning. He's just burning.
What the heck happened?
He's just burning up. And and he falls.
And just half of him is. The other half is things okay. It's really strange.
Yeah, and the thing was is at the same time as I was working on this, they were doing issue 2, which is drawn by Howard Porter. And so he was sending me some of the panels that he was doing. And so he had it so that the Flash was, that's how he looked. He was half burnt on half of his body.
What did Tom King say in the script? What were you supposed to draw?
I think he said kind of the same thing. It was like he's burnt up. He's burning up, and he's slowly burning, and his flesh is falling off, kind of thing. And but because I had seen what Howard Porter had drawn, that's I kind of brought that into how this is here.
Yeah.
So he falls to his knees. He's burning up, and we're getting closer on him. And the camera's kind of tilted now instead of it being straight on like it was here. It's tilted now I like using the tilted camera just to kind of say that something's off here.
Mm-hmm.
The viewer's like, you should be a little weary about what's going on here. So it just adds a dynamism to it. So he's screaming. He says, "I saw God." And the close-up on his eyeball as his flesh is pretty much melted away. And then we get another stat panel here at the bottom, looking down at the Batcave. It's a nice pulled back shot, and the Flash comes racing in. We know it's him because it's now the yellow instead of the red lightning. And so he races up towards the to the Batcave, and and then we have that final page with the dead reverse Flash, that's how I got like Howard Porter. That's how the panel looked when he had sent me his. Yeah. So I tried to, and Batman's in the reverse position, lying the other way, and the Flash is coming in from this side on the page, and he's doing a hockey stop, which again calls back to it calls back to the hockey game. He's doing the hockey stop, and
the subtle stuff that you added, it's really terrific.
Yeah. So this book I think was the one where I thought the most about that kind of stuff. Usually I don't. I just kind of go with my gut feeling and just go with it. But this one, it was like because it was kind of an homage to the Watchmen. I really wanted to think about the way that my panels were laid out and what I was doing in each panel. And so
is this your masterpiece right now?
I think so. I think this is the book I'm most proud of from a visual storytelling perspective. I mean, the story of that issue is very simple. Mm-hmm. It's very simple. It's a very simple concept, but I think that just the way that we tackled it, Tom and I tackled that book. I think his script was very well laid out, and he kind of knew he knew what he wanted me to draw on each panel, and I tried to channel Dave Gibbons and tried to really get that feeling out of this book, like as if you were reading a continuation of Watchmen. And if those 2 pages that we didn't cut out of it were actually in that book, it would have even been even closer to Watchmen, because like I said, the opening sequence was actually like an homage to one of a famous scene from Watchmen, and it would have been really neat to have that scene in there. But like I said, maybe it'll be used in Doomsday Clock.
This is Jason. This is miraculous. This is a great book. It's an example of DC Comics at their best. You, a thinking man's artist, you're still a young man. It makes me excited and hopeful for what's to come from the future from you. And I can tell that you slave and you bleed over your work, and you really care about it, and you have great integrity. I want to ask you what, and by the way, for people watching, I'm going to ask one more question, and then we're going to turn it over to you guys for questions. You'll be able to do a Q&A. I will pick the best questions for Jason and ask him live. But I do want to ask before that, what was the reaction to this comic book? What did you hear back from DC Comics and then from the fans?
The reaction, I think, was really positive. That book is the one I signed the most of now at cons. That issue, everybody really liked all of those lenticular covers, and they also really liked the complete storyline of that series. But that book, I think, I remember hearing back from the editors and even Tom King. They really thought I did a good job, and that's all I ever try to do. I just try to, every book I do, I try to give it my 110%, and I try to get it done on deadlines, because that's what your editors are asking of you, is to get it done on deadline. So I try to do that, and I try to do it to the best of my ability. And a piece of wise advice I once got from Brian Cunningham, because I always struggle with perfectionism. I want things to be perfect. And that means that sometimes I put, too much into pages, too much detail, slave over things that really aren't necessary. But Brian Cunningham once told me, he said, don't strive for perfection, strive for excellence, because you'll never be perfect, but you can do things to an excellent quality. And when he told me that kind of, I think, freed up my soul a little bit, and it kind of helped me to see things differently. Like, you're never going to be perfect. You're not going to draw a perfect book. You're not going to draw even a perfect panel. Like, you're always going to look at your work, and you're always going to see your mistakes and see where you should have changed things. But if you strive to do it to an excellent degree, meaning that you're putting all your heart and all your soul into it, and putting the time into it that you need to put into it, and working hard, then you can be proud and happy of the work that you do, and you could look back on it, with fond memories. And there's plenty of books that I've done that I'm proud of, but I think this one, and like I was mentioning, the stuff I did with Jeff on Justice League, I think those are like the things that I'm the most proud of. And I think that those are also the books where I've really started to come into my own. I've kind of learned a lot of stuff. I learned and got a lot of the rust out of my system with some of the books I was doing in the with Detective Comics and Batman the Dark Knight and stuff. Now I feel like I've kind of found my voice, and so it's I'm focusing less on the things that I'm trying to learn to do, and now I'm actually just taking my knowledge and actually putting it into the work, and I'm finding I'm more and more happy with the work I'm doing now because of that.
Amen. Great. I mean, this is just, it's great talking to you, Jason. So let's open this up to the fans so they can finally ask their questions. The chat has been moving pretty fast the entire time. I wish I could go back and read it, but it just goes. Somebody wants to know, and I'm going to phrase this in a different kind of way. So you can do any book that you want, but I want you to think about something that you'd want to do without sales in mind. Okay, so this isn't going to be a big hit book. It's just a DC property that you really want to do.
Well, I'm actually doing that right now. I'm doing a Swamp Thing one shot, and Swamp Thing is a character. I think Swamp Thing would probably be either be my second or third favorite DC character. It would probably be like Batman, Superman, then Swamp Thing. And Swamp Thing has always been a character I've loved since I was a little kid. I didn't read the comics probably until I was in my 20s, but I remember watching. There was an old cartoon show in the 90s when I was a kid, and there was a couple of really lousy B movies, but we had those movies taped off of TV, and I used to watch them. I've always just loved that character. And so after I finished the Button, and I've been kind of waiting to get script on the next big project. I knew I would have a little bit of time. And so I really went after DC and said, I want to do a passion project. I just want to do a Swamp Thing one shot. Give me 40 pages of Swamp Thing to draw, something that I can be proud of. And so that's what I'm working on right now with Tom King. And I knew I wanted Tom King to write it because we had been talking about doing Swamp Thing, and I really liked his take that he had Swamp Thing in one of the issues of Batman recently, and I just really liked his kind of how the storyline and everything. And I said, I want you to write this. And so I ended up giving him a pitch of something that I wanted him to pretty much just take and turn into a story. And he kind of took bits and pieces of it, but then set it in, instead of in a swamp where I wanted it to be set, he set it in the winter in a blizzard. And so this whole issue I'm drawing, it's in the snow, it's a blizzard, and but it's really pushed me. It's really, I think I haven't really drawn too much organic stuff like trees and water and mountains and hills and scenery. And so that's what this book is. And I think I have one more page to go, which I'm going to probably finish up tomorrow. And again, I think it's just one of those issues that I'm going to look back on and be really proud of. And I can say that, yeah, I did a Swamp Thing book. You know, I would love to do like a 4-issue series or something, but
check it off.
Yeah. So, you know, for now, I think this kind of quenches that desire. I wanted to do something different. I didn't want to just do another issue of Justice League or Batman or something. I wanted to do something totally different and just kind of cleanse my palette so that whatever my next project's going to be, it'll, I'll have gotten this out of my system and I can move on.
All right, so you got a lot of questions here, so I'll try to go through them and get as many as I can here. You can be brief if you want with some of these answers. Jason, please tell us why you quit doing ongoings and if you'll ever do another again. This guy specifically mentions he wants a John Stewart solo book out of you.
Yeah, after I'd finished Dark Side War, I was just burnt out from that lifestyle. I just didn't. When you're on an ongoing book, that's all that is your life, and my wife and I, we have a 2.5-year-old son and we got another one on the way. And, I just started kind of looking at my family and thinking, what am I doing? Like I'm putting all my time into comic books, which is, I love my job. Don't get me wrong. I love it. This is my passion. This is my dream. But I said to myself, do I want to live this way? Like, do I want to just work in my office 24/7 and never see my family? And my wife, during Justice League, that my son was born around the time I was working on issue 44, and he was born in August. And I literally took off like 2 days and then I had to go right back to work while my wife was taking care of a newborn baby. And that kind of shook me up. I kind of said, I don't want to do that. I don't want to be the dad who's just never in the picture. And so I kind of said to my wife, here's the thing. I from now on, I feel like I can kind of call the shots. I don't need to work on ongoings. We're making a good living. And the other thing is too, and this goes back to my faith, is that I believe that God will provide. And I believe that you need to be content in where you're at in your life. And I know that whatever happens, God's going to provide. He's going to put food on the table. He's going to provide me with work. And the funny thing is, this last year I only did 3 issues. Yeah, I'll only be done 3 issues in 2017. And yet I had more work this year from outside sources that was less work for more money. so I did a whole bunch of little things. Like I designed some coins for the Canadian Mint that were for the Justice League movie, which was a really cool opportunity. I ended up designing some more stuff for them. I did some other things for Warner Brothers, designed some action figures for DC Collectibles. So I did a whole bunch of other little things. and ended up having a really good year. There was not much stress. I got to hang out with my family, got to take weekends off, go off and do things during the summer. I think every weekend in the summer we were gone somewhere, and I just really had a good year. And I will say that I'm not done with ongoings. I just, for this period of my life, I needed to step away from it. I know that next year there's going to be some big projects that I'm going to be jumping into that are going to take up a lot of time. But those projects, from what it looks like, it's going to be a little bit more lax on the deadline. But there will be a large chunk of work that will come out next year, hopefully. And I'm not saying never to ongoings, because I will probably do it eventually. But at this period in time, I needed to take a step back, and I needed to put my family first.
Yeah. And this is a good question here from Ashland Reaver. Ashland says, can you ask if he has conflict between faith and work? And I think you touched on that a little bit, but if you want to expound on that a little bit.
Yeah, I do. I think I did more in the beginning, because when you're first starting off in your career, you can't really say what you want to work on. You just take whatever job they're willing to give you, because you're trying your best to just, get the work done and keep making a good impression, so that you can, keep getting more work and grow your career. One thing that I had mentioned before is, I pray about everything. I pray about every offer I get. And I always just pray that, God, that I say to God, Lord, whatever you would have me do, put it in my hands. If you want to shut doors to certain projects, do it. I trust that you're going to lay the right projects at my feet, and you're going to show me the direction I need to go that would make you pleased at the work that I'm doing as well. And hey, you know what? You put your career in the hands of the Creator, and all of a sudden, things just go well. Things have gone really well for me.
Yeah.
And it's funny, all of the things that I've always dreamed of, all of those things have come about. I've worked on a lot of characters I've always dreamed of, and I've worked on dream projects. And a lot of that was just, I just pray. I try to have prayer time, and and I try to, God knows my heart, and He knows what I want to do, and He knows what I don't want to do. And, so far He's kept me away from projects that I don't want to do, and has given me projects that line up with what I believe in. And I haven't had too many conflicts where I have to really balance that. I find that the conflicts come more from what I was just talking about, like knowing that you have responsibility to your family, and you're now that I have a son, I have responsibilities to be a leader in the house, and a responsibility to be a spiritual leader to my family, and so that's where the conflict comes a lot of times. It's just how much work, what am I really, the most important things in your life is your family and your relationship with them, and it's really not the comic books that you draw. In the end, at the end of my life, I'm not going to sit there and think, oh, I wish I would have drawn 3 more comic books. I wish I would have taken that monthly back in 2017. I'm going to say, no, you're going to say, I wish I had more time with my family, so, and I think that if you look at your life, and you look at your career, and whatever you're doing, whatever your passions are, if you look at it from that perspective, and you put, again, as a Christian, I put all those things in God's hands, and I trust that He's gonna put me on the right path. And there's going to be ups and there's going to be downs. He's going to take you, God sometimes takes you through valleys, and sometimes you go through dark spots in your life. But as long as you're always, following Him and going towards where He wants you to go, He doesn't steer you wrong. And I've often said, if it's God's will that He all of a sudden pulls me out of comics for some reason, then so be it, because I know that I'm content, and I know that God will put me in a position where my talents can be used or whatever. He's going to provide, and He's going to put me in the place where He needs me to be.
Thank you, Vedant Singh, for the super chat. You're asking about how he got started. You can go back and watch the beginning of the interview. You'll get all that information. He does go over that pretty extensively at the beginning. Somebody does ask, are you still friends with Dave Finch? That's a fun question.
Yeah, I am. I don't talk to him as much, even though we only live about 30 minutes away. I usually see him at Comic Cons more than I do. I should get back. I should go over to his house and hang out with him, because whenever I go over there, whenever I see Dave, we have really good times and good chats. And I will say that I do still look to him for advice, for mentorship. You know, he's one of those guys who's been around for a long time, and he's done it all, and he's very wise when it comes to those things. And so, you know, I'll sometimes I'll send him an email and ask him about something, and you know, he gets back to me, or I'll give him a call and see what he has to say. But yeah, Dave, I can't say enough good things about Dave. He's him and his wife have been such a massive part of my life, and I wouldn't be here doing what I'm doing if it wasn't for David Finch seeing something in me, seeing a potential, and teaching me.
Mm-hmm. Tiago Murta wants to know, are you a fan of non-American comics, manga, French? If so, what are your favorites?
You know what? I have to say that I don't really know much about non-American comics. I respect the art styles and whatnot. You know, from both manga, even though I'm not a huge manga or anime fan, but you know, there are some films and stuff that I've really liked when it comes to that stuff. I've always wanted to get into more of the European and French comics. I've always, you know, I've loved, when I was a kid, I really loved Hergé's Tintin books. And I loved that art style and all the stuff that he did there. But, you know, I would like to get into some of that at some point. I think that I really like the presentation that the French comics, you know, they do these bigger books, and it just seems much more grand, you know. But yes, sadly, I need to get into more of that kind of stuff.
There's not so much time to read when you're drawing all the time, is there? I mean,
that's true. That's true.
Somebody says, Unranked Chevron says, Jason Fabok, would you like to go back to the less detail-oriented art of yesteryear, or do you prefer the more detailed look and workload of modern comics?
I like the detailed stuff. That's always what has attracted me, and you know, I don't know. I think that's what the fans like as well. You know, I don't know. I think I don't know. There's not a knock against like simplistic artwork, because there's a place for it, and there's beautiful artwork that's being done. You know, like I had mentioned, I love Tim Sale, and you know, I love simplistic artwork, and I think it works very well in certain spots and certain things. But I think I found where I need to be artistically, and I think that, you know, my selling point is that I can pump out high quality, high detailed art really fast, and that's what the comic book companies really love. And so you got to ride what is working for you, and it's working for me. You know, I think it would be fun to experiment. You know, like one of my biggest inspirations is Mike Mignola, and I mean, he's simplified his artwork. It's very, you know, very simplistic, but it gets everything across. All the shadows are there, and the storytelling is beautiful, and the way he uses negative space and all this kind of stuff. And I love that. I think it would be cool to maybe do like one day work on a Hellboy or something and try and ape some of that style in a way, or simplify it just enough that you can kind of get
or add it to what you're doing. I mean, you know.
Yeah. So, but for now, I'm just following what I'm doing, and it's paying off, and that's you know, I just got to keep going with what works.
Got two questions that keep getting asked here. Nasser wants to know, is Jason going to C2E2 2018? And then Wildcard wants to know if you're going to Big Apple Con in 2018.
I haven't been invited to those cons yet. I don't really do every year I do maybe 3 or 4 cons. I just find that I don't really have too much time to do many cons. I always have fun. I always have fun when I go to them, but most of the time my wife and I choose cons based on the location and if we can take a little vacation. You know, so like we did Hawaii this year, and we went to Hawaii for a week, and we went to Vegas, and we did some different things like that. And I know that next year, it hasn't been announced yet, but I'll announce it here. I know I'll be going to WonderCon.
Somebody just asked that right this minute. Yeah.
So I just agreed to do that, and I really enjoyed doing WonderCon. I did it 2 years back, and so I'm going to do that one, and I'll probably do Fan Expo in Toronto again. And I'm kind of trying to see. I'm looking at the list of cons and trying to figure all that out. So once I know, I'll let people know.
Okay, I'm going to ask 2 more questions, and we'll wrap this up here. Jason Fabok, where can they buy your artwork?
I have a little online store, jasonfabok.bigcartel.com. Most of the stuff on there right now is just covers. That's pretty much all I sell, really, because a lot of my work is digital. The covers, I mean, there'll be splash pages and stuff, but a lot of those get snagged before they ever reach an online store. A lot of times, certain art collectors, they know, okay, I want a splash from this book or whatever, and so a lot of those go quick. But I am hoping with my next project, if all works out well and we have the time, I'm hoping to actually do most of that all traditionally. I'd like to try and do a book, either just pencil it and then have somebody ink it, or try and pencil and ink the whole thing. I would like to try that, but again, I always say that, but then when it comes down to it and it's actually deadline time, it's just so much easier to just go with the digital process. But that's where you can find some of my artwork. And I'm hoping to get some head sketches and stuff up there soon, but I just haven't had much time to really do that. So, yeah.
Okay. Diversity, inclusion, compassion, and kindness in comics, who is a YouTuber that people should follow, says, what would you do if you couldn't draw? Do you have any other passions?
Oh, man. Well, I think filmmaking, I really wanted, I think that's kind of where I fell into comics, is that I loved the fact that it was kind of like filmmaking, but through artwork on a static page. It's essentially comic books. It's almost like a storyboard for a movie. And that was the original. I had kind of mentioned that at the beginning, that there were some doors that were closed. And one of them was that I had applied to a film school when I was in high school. I applied to this film school, and I felt like I had all the grades, I had everything, and I felt I should have got into this film school, and they denied me. I didn't get in. And I remember just feeling so angry, and I remember questioning God, saying, like, you knew this was my dream. Why would you shut the door? Why would you shut the door on this? And now, looking back on it, he shut the door because he had something better in mind, and so, but filmmaking, I feel like my storytelling ability that I have in comics, I think that would translate well to making films. I don't know. I like to teach. I think it would be fun to teach, to be a teacher. Or art teacher, or history or something like that. That kind of thing is fun. I wanted to be an NHL hockey player growing up, but I just, when you kind of realize when you're like 13 or 14, if you haven't like gone to like some of the upper echelons of like junior hockey at that point, you're pretty much not going to ever make it. But that's always still. That's always still like a dream of mine. It would have been to play hockey, but I don't know. I'm sure I would have found something. I'm sure I would have fallen into a passion. All I know is that one summer I worked at like a tool and die factory, and I just sat there thinking to myself, like, I can't do this. I need to do something creative. I need to do something where my brain is being creative and I'm writing or I'm creating something. That's what I knew my life had to be. My calling was something to do something creative with your life. And so I find the most joy when I'm able to be creative.
Thank God that you do. You are a modern master. Jason, I am so glad that you joined us tonight. A lot of people are saying thank you, thank you. Somebody just gave me a $5,000 yen super chat, Project RX. That's probably like 50 bucks. Thank you very, very much. That'll go to the channel. And people are thrilled to have learned about you. And I thank you. I mean, thanks for joining us tonight. Absolutely great.
No problem. Anytime. I had a blast, and I think what you're doing is really cool. And I think these kinds of things are really important to raise up the next generation of artists, because when you're looking for information on how to break into comics or what things you could be doing to make yourself a better artist, sometimes it's hard and sometimes it's a little confusing. But when you get to hear how different artists and different writers, how their path was, I think this influences that next generation. And I hope that, I think it would be really cool if in 20, 30 years, there's artists coming up that are saying to me like, hey, you really influenced me, just like, me saying to you that you influenced me, or Jim Lee influenced me, or David Finch influenced me. And that's kind of, I'm hoping that we'll see really great artistic talent, coming out in the future and carrying on the torch of comics.
Well, I mean, that's what we do here at Comic Artist Pro Secrets too. We pull back the curtain for up-and-coming artists to learn some of the tricks of the trade. So thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. And we'll see you again next week. I believe we've got Tony Moore from Walking Dead next week.
Nice.
So yeah, look forward to that. And okay, good night. Bye-bye.